Okay, sorry about that. I had to agree to be recorded. Here we go. My name's Olivia Van Dam again, and I'm a project manager on the South Coast team. I'm joined by Irvin, who will also be presenting. So thank you so much. In this training, we'll be covering your grant's conditions precedent and other steps necessary to receive your grant and begin spending your grant funds. Please note that until the board officially approves your projects at the September 17th board meeting, you are unable to start spending any of your grant funds. But you and your project manager can get everything prepped this summer so that you can be ready to go upon the board's approval. That will happen in um, September. So during this training, please use the chat to ask any questions that come up. We will try to answer questions as they come up in the chat, but we may not be able to get to all of them. And we also have time for Q&A after the presentation. And returning grantees, you can share your experiences and your tips in the chat with each other as well. There is a mix of newer and returning grantees here today, so we love seeing you all support one another. All right, so you were selected. Yes, you will have access to a copy of the slide deck as well as the recording of the presentation. So this will be a resource that is sent out to all of you so you can review what we cover today because we are going to be covering a lot of details. So please feel free to also reach out to your project manager after this presentation with any questions. Okay, so here your ETC project was selected. Now what do you do? So this is a flow chart of kind of the next steps of what to expect. So you're going to begin your conditions precedent, which is a list that we'll go through of what that is, what that means. Then you'll do your work program. The board meeting is going to happen. Then after the board meeting, you'll have your grant agreement, then a letter that is a notice to proceed to begin your start work and begin working on your project. So that is the process here with the flow chart. All right, so you're going to assemble your conditions precedent for your project manager to approve. Vanessa sent those notification letters and introduced you to your project manager. So that is your person and point of contact at the Coastal Conservancy to work with on these conditions precedent. And we'll get more into the work program a little later. So for the conditions precedent to disbursement are the items your project manager must check off before you can start work and spend your ETC funds. We ask that you begin assembling and working on these items with your project manager ahead of the board meeting so that you're ready to go and so that you're as soon as your grant agreement is signed. So here are the following things that are included in conditions precedent. Your grantee's board resolution. So this is a resolution from your organization's board of directors authorizing your org to enter into a grant agreement with the Conservancy. And your project manager can provide you with a template of what that looks like. Then your work program, which details the work that you'll complete under the grant. Proof of insurance. So this is a certificate of liability insurance that shows our coverage requirements are met. You'll see an example on this slide here of what a COI looks like. And if your ETC grant requires you to increase your insurance coverage, you can charge those additional costs and insurance premiums to the grant as well. So say your insurance that you currently have for your program doesn't meet our requirements, you can charge that to the grant, the difference of what it's going to charge you now. Permits. So most ETC projects are coastal recreation projects and permits aren't needed, but speak with your PM if you think your project requires permits. And finally, you'll need to enter into a grant agreement. And this can only happen after the board has approved your project, but your PM will work with you this summer to draft that scope. All right, so now we're going to talk about the work program. The work program is one of the conditions precedent and typically the condition precedent that takes the longest to complete. So it serves a few different purposes. It establishes what your project will be including the project activities, your locations, your costs, etc. It lays out your project's budget and schedule, and then once the grant is complete, it serves as a record of what your project has accomplished. Since the grant agreement can only be changed through a formal amendment process, the work program is a more flexible document that can be revised by working with your PM. So the grant agreement has more of a process to amend, but there is some more flexibility when developing your work program with your PM here. And you can think of your work program as an agreement between you and the Conservancy of what your project will be and how it will unfold. So by reviewing and approving it, your PM helps ensure that your project is in line with the Explore the Coast grant and the Conservancy requirements. So as a result, it's really important to check with your PM before deviating from anything spelled out in the work program that is approved. So we have a special work program template for Explore the Coast that helps you guide you through the drafting process. And Cherie will share that in the chat as well, some of these templates for these things. All right, I'm going to pause here for anything in the chat that I've missed. Are there any questions, Cherie, so far?
No questions in the chat yet, but feel free to put them in if you have any.
Okay, so please note, this is a very important note. Any and all trip locations, activities, and project costs must be included in your approved work program prior to incurring costs, or else you risk not being reimbursed for those costs. So when in doubt, ask your PM. They're your point person for this project and for this grant, and ask for permission, not for forgiveness. That is our motto, and we really want to see everything approved in your work program. All right, so we will start diving into what the work program looks like. So at the top, it's going to include a project description. So we're going to go through these components piece by piece. There's a lot of information in this training. And so I want to note that most of the information that I'm sharing today is also in the template that Cherie shared in the chat. So don't worry about remembering all of this right now or taking notes because this is all available to you in our grantee manual and in the work program template. Okay, so the project description is a concise high-level summary of your project. So here it shares the goal and what will be done to achieve them. You'll describe your program, the number of participants served, where they're from, and what program activities you will do. And you can use language from questions 1 and 2 in your ETC application. To help clarify project targets for you and your PM, you'll also fill out the table stating the total number of project participants, the total percentage of participants coming from ETC priority communities, and the total number of trips that you're going to provide over the entirety of the project. These should match what was provided in your application. If for some reason the numbers do not match what you put in your application, you need to notify your PM as soon as possible. Finally, to ensure that your participant activities fall within areas that ETC funds and are allowed to cover, you'll list every single anticipated trip or program location. This will allow your PM to confirm before your project starts that your trip locations are eligible locations. Any trip activities that take place at a location not listed in this section may not be eligible for reimbursement. Should you need to add a location to the work program at a later time, you can simply reach out to your PM. And for returning grantees, feel free to add any work program completion tips into the chat as we go through each section. So, all right, next is the scope of work. So in this section, you're going to describe your project in task form. You'll provide a short narrative description containing important details for each task. Important details such as what staff or participants will do, where they'll do them, and when. This narrative contains outcomes, and task deliverables will be the products produced through this task. For instance, if an outcome of a task is to train 5 camp instructors, then a suitable deliverable would be a camp instructor roster. So here in the example on the slide, you can see the task narrative, which contains the outcomes for this Alma Mutsun Land Trust Coastal Stewardship Summer Camp. And then the deliverables are progress reports and a final report describing accomplishments under the grant, including number of campers served from which groups, activities undertaken, and a copy of any program evaluation or final materials completed. All right, pausing for any questions here on the scope of work and kind of the tasks or the difference between the narrative and a deliverable.
No questions in the chat yet.
Okay, great. And I like to think about the deliverables as something you actually turn into your PM. So it can be an additional document or like the example I shared, a roster of attendance or results of a survey or a summary of surveys. Your PM will work with you and help kind of explain these. Your progress reports are a deliverable, and I highly recommend you look over the progress report template, which will happen when you turn in an invoice, you also submit a progress report. So that's going to help you think about what deliverables you need as well. All right, next slide. So now scope of work to mandatory task 1. So task 1 is always included. It's always project management. So this covers in the work program template, it has a pre-written task summary that covers task 1. So this covers any work related to specifically managing your ETC grant, um, to delivering your ETC grant as drafting progress reports, meeting with your PM, invoicing, and other grant management activities. So under project management, we also require subtask 1.1, which is quarterly meetings. And you should work with your project manager to set up quarterly meetings where you can provide project updates and ask questions with your PM. This is very helpful when it comes time to submit invoices as well. So we require this for ETC, and it's great. You get time with your time on the calendar with your project manager. All right. Next is weather contingency. So any and all tasks that involve project implementation, they must include a weather contingency. So weather contingencies lay out a pre-approved plan B for any trips canceled by unexpected weather events. This ensures you'll be able to meet your program goals regardless of weather-related trip cancellations. We prefer that grantees plan to reschedule any trips canceled due to unexpected weather. However, we recognize that all projects are unique, so work with your PM to find a solution that works with you. So you can see on the slide here, it lays out a plan B for any trips canceled, and this is in the work program template as well. Next is your work program schedule. This is essentially the project scope shown in a table format. In the schedule, each task is identified, as well as the task deliverables and the estimated start and completion dates for the tasks. Some deliverables, such as invoices, may be submitted regularly throughout the grant, and others have a single completion date. So you can see in the example on the slide, for task 1, project management, which was required for everyone, you have the deliverables of requests for disbursement and copies of subcontracted monthly throughout the contract term, or that will be quarterly throughout the contract term, depending on what you choose. And then number 2 is the task of surf days. The deliverables are rosters of participants and photos, and those are estimated to be completed by September 2024. So when the project manager sees your invoice, they'll also expect that deliverable at that time during that month and date. All right, next After the schedule is the budget. The budget section is one of the most important parts of your work program. It contains the same task numbers and titles found in the scope of work and in the schedule sections from above, and the amounts allocated for each task. The budget should not include additional program funding outside of the ETC grant. It's important to be simple here so that the department that reviews your invoices can easily read your budget and check it against your invoices. If you're working with a fiscal sponsor, you can add a line item for this fiscal sponsor fee. And next is the budget details. So this section is where you'll list direct costs, travel costs, and indirect costs from your budget. It should be a much more detailed version of the budget table where you identify specific costs. And please note that all organizations that receive funding from the Conservancy are required to meet strict accounting standards. While rare, there's always the possibility of an audit, so it's a responsibility of our grantees to use generally accepted accounting principles established by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. All right, I will pause again for anything, and I saw a few things in the chat.
Yeah, no questions, but Sarah did just note back in the task section of the work program that there are different ways to break up your project by task. So one of the ways is to divide it by your different trip types, and another way is to have a task just for planning or another for implementation. So work with your PM to figure out what will work best for your project, but there's some flexibility there.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Sarah. And you can see Cherie is putting in some resources in the chat as well about what you can bill to your ETC grant. Okay, budget and costs. So it's important to list all anticipated costs in this section of the work program as it is referenced when approving invoices. So any costs that are not included in the work program are not eligible to be reimbursed without prior approval by your project manager. So we're reinforcing this that we said earlier. So always check with your project manager before incurring costs. All right, direct costs. So direct costs are the specific expenses related to carrying out your project. So these include labor costs for project management and implementation of the project-specific materials, equipment, and subcontractors. Under labor costs, lists out the titles of staffers who will be billed to the grant, but don't include their rates or their names. Under materials and equipment, list out any special materials and equipment you'll need to purchase for for project purposes. If you expect to purchase equipment that will last longer than the length of your grant, you'll need to insert language stating such equipment will be retained by you, the grantee, for project purposes. And you'll find guidance for this in the work program template as well. Include your fiscal sponsorship fee in this section as well as any anticipated project costs, such as a bus and car rentals or mileage. So you'll see some of these types of direct costs are labor, project-related supplies, food, and transportation. And then some of these have asterisks on them because of just checking on what is approved and kind of some caveats about equipment that you need to buy. Here's the allowable costs chart. So we've created this document which summarizes whether or not certain items are able to be reimbursed through the ETC grant. So this document can be found linked in your work program template. Some items are approved on a case-by-case basis, so be sure to consult with your PM. Examples of commonly requested costs that we do not allow are gift cards, gas cards, gifts, prizes, and vehicles. So these are not allowed by this grant. So you can see some of the examples here, what we talked about with equipment. Sometimes it's okay to buy more expensive equipment if they're a relatively small portion of your budget and integral to the success of your program. So you can kind of read through this allowable cost chart. We are a state agency, so public funds that are need to be spent on reasonable, unnecessary costs. All right, indirect costs. So these are nonprofit, non-project specific costs of doing businesses. This is known as overhead cost and includes anything such as rent, utility bills, general purpose equipment such as office supplies, printers, ink, etc. So you're allowed to bill up to 20% of your grant total as indirect costs. And as with all items invoiced for reimbursement, please keep detailed records of your expenses should an audit occur. All right, work program section about subcontractors. Subcontractors are entities who you'll be hiring to perform work under your grant. So some examples of subs: kayaking instructors, wilderness safety instructors, community partners to carry out direct project work. In the subcontractor section of the work program, you will state the name, the qualifications, and a brief scope of work of the subcontractors. If you realize after the work program is approved that you need to hire another subcontractor, please email your project manager with the same information, name, qualification, and scope of work, to get them approved in your work program before you hire them. Okay, and the last slide for the work program is the plan for acknowledgement. So this is the final section of your work program, and it is a grant requirement. The Conservancy would like to be acknowledged in your organization's announcements, your communication materials when you mention ETC, your ETC program. So some examples include social media, press releases, program brochures, etc. So this gives us recognition to ensure that future funding is made available to the Explore the Coast program. So we really like seeing this. We really appreciate getting the word out about Explore the Coast and about how the Coastal Conservancy is supporting your work. And this helps ensure that future organizations can also receive this funding. So thank you so much for making a plan to acknowledge us as part of your work program. All right, and so the board approval. So as we mentioned at the top of the meeting, this ETC grant round will be going to the September 17th board meeting. And this is a reminder that while your project is selected for funding, it still has to go to the board of the State Coastal Conservancy for approval. So all ETC projects for this funding round will be presented in one presentation at this meeting. And if you haven't already, please provide your PM with letters of support for your project. If you'd like to attend the meeting, please talk with your project manager as well if you would like to be there. And yeah, Cherie said that everyone has submitted at least one support letter. So thank you so much for getting those in by the July 31st deadline. It was awesome to see those, and we appreciate seeing that and getting it as part of the exhibit for the staff recommendation. Okay, so next is the grant after the board approval. You will have a grant agreement. So if your project is approved by the board, then you will enter into an official grant agreement. And these outline the terms and conditions of the grant. So it's a legally binding um, form or contract that any formal changes will need an amendment. You'll work with your project manager to determine if changes to the program warrants an amendment. Three dates to pay attention to is the work completion date, when the grantee needs to finish work by. This is the most important for your grantee because no work after that date can be paid for. The final request for disbursement submittal date, so this is the due date for your final grant billing, 1 month after your work completion date. And then the grant termination date. So this is the day that your grant legally expires, which is 3 months after the completion date. Okay, so in this conditions precedent, to kind of wrap up this section of all of the pieces that are going to be approved by your project manager. After the board approves your project, your grant agreement is executed and the terms of all the conditions precedent are met, which includes the work program, which is the one we went really into depth on today. You'll receive an approval letter. This is also called a notice to proceed. So the date on the notice to proceed letter is the first date that you, for costs that you can charge to the grant. So you can only start work after you receive this letter from your project manager. Okay, and I think I am passing it off to Irvin for this section. So thank you so much for walking through the work program with me. And please, again, add any questions in the chat.
Great. Thanks, Olivia. Okay, so in the following section, for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to go over our invoicing process. So most often our grants are on a reimbursement basis, which means that you will get paid after the costs have been incurred. So you can invoice as frequently as once a month. But we ask that you at least invoice like once quarterly. There's not really a set schedule for invoicing, so you can work with your PM to decide what works best for your program. Yeah, as Olivia mentioned in the last slide, don't invoice for any work before your notice to proceed date. Your invoice will comprise of a completed request for disbursement, or what we call an RFD form. It'll also include the progress report and the costs, backup documentation for all the costs, and all of that will be combined into a single PDF. All direct costs and subcontracts will need to have backup documentation, and we ask that you do not include any of the deliverables in the invoices. Those can be sent directly to your project manager. Okay, progress report. So progress report is used to cover, to summarize the work that was incurred during the RFD cycle. So paired with the RFD, the progress report should tell a story of the costs that were incurred. We also want to hear about the project's progress, challenges, and successes for that billing period. So in the progress report that we asked we asked you to be like informative, but you can also like keep it brief and just outline all the points in like bullet point forms. We also love like photos and stories, so yeah, you're welcome to include those in the progress report. And if you have like higher resolution photos that we can use for our export to coast like programming efforts, like you can share those directly with your PMs. Okay, so here is an example, a screenshot of the progress report. So it is, it's, yeah, it just clearly outlines like the project name, like organization, and just like a summary of the work that was completed under each of the tasks. So these tasks should parallel the work program task that went over earlier. And there was also like a section on the right side under part 2, community served, where you can include, free to include number of participants served. And yeah, we encourage that you keep track of the participants that were served like throughout the project period, because that will be needed. That will be need to be included in the final report. Okay, and here is just an example of our 2-page request for disbursement, the RFD form. This is one of the one part of the overall invoice. So this will be like the cover page of the RFD package. And we have a template of this in both in Excel and a PDF version for you to for you to use. So yeah, I think Sherry will drop the links to that. I mean, you can check those out and see, and yeah, ask your PM if you have any questions. Now, as a general rule of thumb, the blue boxes you kind of see here, like that's on the right, on the left side of the first. Yeah, that, thanks for the pointer. Yeah, those are the blue boxes. That's for you to fill in, and the yellow and green boxes, those will auto calculate your inputs. Okay, backup documentation examples. So as I mentioned earlier, for all costs incurred, you will need to have support your purchases with like backup documentation. So um, the receipt should show like a paid or a zero balance if you purchase online from Amazon or other websites, and the document should show that the products were shipped. We do not accept bank statements as form of backup documentation. And yes, which is why we encourage that you save all your receipts to include in the RFD. So yeah, we just have some receipts here as examples of what we take as backup documentation. Now for materials and equipment, this includes like travel costs. We can pay for car travel one of two ways. So the first way is we can reimburse your personal vehicle mileage through the state travel rate, which as of January 1st was updated to point zero 0.725 cents per mile. And this rate covers the maintenance and use of vehicle, including gas, insurance, wear and tear. The documentation is a mileage table, as seen on the slide, that shows the date of travel to and from the location and an identifier for each unique car driven, the trip purpose, and number of miles and the dollar that it amounts to following the rate. The second way that we can pay for car travel is through reimbursement for gas costs and rental car costs. So yeah, with rental car and gas costs, you will need to include a receipt. Otherwise, if you choose the first option, you'll need to include a table that shows how like the mileage that was traveled. Okay, we can also pay for bus rentals, parking fees, and tolls. When in doubt, again, just like ask your project manager. You can also reference Export to Coast allowable cost guidance that outlines the type of expenses that our grant can reimburse for. So the allowable cost document, which I think Sherry will drop to the chat, um, it lists out the common Export to Coast program costs and whether those are payable with your Export to Coast grant fund. We recommend that you keep a copy of this document for your reference, and it's like a high-level table that outlines the general costs. But if you have any more specific questions, yeah, just reach out to your PM. Okay, just have two more slides, and I see some questions in the chat, but I think we have time for that afterwards. So, backup document examples. This is for subcontractors. So subcontractors are other people or organizations that you pay to complete a service for you. For documentation, you can provide their invoices, which we have on this slide here. And yeah, just a reminder for subcontractors, they must be approved and listed in the work program before in order to be paid. And our advanced payment program. So yeah, although we operate on a reimbursement model under certain circumstances, we can approve advancements of funds. And we offer this because we heard that it can be hard for a lot of Export to Coast organizations to front the costs. So we implemented an advanced payment program to better serve organizations that have cash flow challenges. Now, to participate in this program, yeah, just we encourage you to connect with your PM to learn more about the specifics of the program of the program's requirement, and yeah, so just reach out to your PM if this is something you're interested in and know that your project will need. Resources. So yeah, we have been dropping, Cherie has been dropping links throughout the course of the presentation, but of course we also, all these links are found on our website. So I think we'll just drop like links here for you to save. I recommend just like bookmarking these on your browser. That's what I do. So we have the grantee manual, allowable costs, documents, and also Export to Coast work program. Of course, your project manager is the greatest like resource for you. And yeah, you have their contact information and can reach out to them if you have any questions about your grant program. Okay, question time.
So RJ asked a question, which we did respond to, but can grantees use both models of reimbursement for um, when charging for travel? So for example, could you use the reimbursement model for mileage as well as when you're not using an employee car? So essentially, like, can you rent a car one day and then another day use your own car and ask for mileage? And the answer is yes. Just make sure it's really clear that you aren't double dipping in one trip and charging mileage costs for a rental car. And I think that would be, you could do that through the that table that Irvin showed, the mileage table where it shows where you're going to and from and the purpose. Just make sure that's clear, but it shouldn't be an issue. And then another comment that we had was that the mileage rate as of July 1st is 76 cents. Um, and I don't think that's been updated on the CalHR website, which is what we defer to. I see that the IRS rate went up to 76 cents. So that's something that we should investigate on our end, unless somebody else on our team has insight into that.
Yeah, that's something we can look into. I think I've been using the 0.725 rate, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, it was probably just for the new fiscal year starting July 1st of 2026. So we probably just haven't seen that updated, but we can check with people on our team. All right, Sarah put in the chat, generally California uses an annual rate, 2026 mileage reimbursement rate. Let's see here.
Yeah, and that one's at 0.725. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we will in our follow-up email give you a solid answer on where we land with that.
Hey, do we have any other questions about the board meeting, about your work program, about the Export to Coast program? We saw 10 minutes in this on this call. Aaron's excited for the program. Yeah, we are excited to bring your projects to the board and get them approved. Yeah, it's lots of good projects. All
Does
right,
anyone
well,
want to come off camera or introduce themselves or like say where you're from? How many programs have been selected for funding? We have 13 projects that have been selected for funding. And in the staff recommendation or the presentation at the board, you can see and learn more about some of those programs, and you'll see a map of which different regions they're coming from. But we have some from the North Coast all the way up at, yeah, in the northeast corner of the state. We have folks all the way down in Imperial County in Southern California and people along the Central Coast. So it's really a wonderful range of programs across the entire state of California.